This year, we're really focusing on including the recurring themes and concepts in our lessons and being really intentional about pointing those out and helping students understand how specific content can relate to a larger theme. So I want to show you a resource in our instructional materials that can help you do that. For this example, I'm going to be working in 3rd grade, Unit 4, Energy Flow and Ecosystems, specifically Lesson 2. So for Lesson 2, the standards is identify and describe the flow of energy in a food chain and predict how changes in a food chain, such as removal of frogs from a pond or bees from a field, affect the ecosystem. The recurring theme and concept for this lesson is explain how factors or conditions impact stability and change in objects, organisms, and systems. So this one is a great match for our TEKS because it addresses the stability and change, mostly the change that can happen when we remove an organism from a food chain. As a reminder, this is the poster that Think Big provided. This is one that you can point to and talk about, maybe even nest some drawings and things under. I always want to remind you that anytime you start planning, a good place to start is our TEKS guide. You get to that by clicking on this little link right here. And TEKS guide will have the standard, and it will also provide detailed explanations or definitions as needed. And these are great to help us understand what we're supposed to teach, what students are supposed to understand, and what boundaries there are so that we stay very aligned and teach just the things that are appropriate for our students. Okay, now to the instructional materials piece. So in your McGraw-Hill materials, we're in 3rd grade. This particular lesson comes from Chapter 9, Lesson 2. And so we'll scroll down, and the recurring theme and concept page that I'm talking about is in the Engage blade. And you'll see 2 resources. You'll see the student-facing resource, and then you'll see the teacher support. So let's look and see what those look like. This is the student-facing page. It provides a prompt and then some space for students to respond, but it's pretty generic. Then we have the teacher-facing page, and it can give us a better idea of what McGraw-Hill thought we should put there and even give us some inspiration. But I want you to know that these are to be paired with a particular video in our instructional materials. And that's really what's going to give more of a generic page, something really specific for students to think about and be prompted by. So if we look at our instructional materials, we keep scrolling down to explain, then we'll see there's a video in Explain called Effects of a Food Chain. It's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And that's the video that we should play for students and then prompt students to respond using the Recurring Themes and Concepts resource. So let's watch the video together just like we would have our students do in class and see how it's a good fit.
Effects of a food chain. What can happen to an ecosystem if an organism is removed from the food chain? You may think removing an organism from a food chain would only affect the next organism in that food chain that depends on it. This is true, but did you consider that more organisms farther up the food chain can be affected too? Here, how about we take a peek at a couple of birds, their food chains, and how this works? First, the hummingbird. What if the hummingbird was no longer in this food chain? Hummingbirds spend hours and hours flying from flower to flower. When they suck up nectar with their straw-like tongue, tiny pollen grains stick to their bodies. Hummingbirds have a special niche in their environment. A niche is a useful role. When they fly to other flowers, the pollen falls off. The transfer of pollen from one flower to another is called pollination. Flowers need pollen to make seeds. But what might happen if all the hummingbirds were removed from their environment? Hummingbirds have predators. Frogs and snakes depend on hummingbirds for food. Without hummingbirds, there might be less frogs and snakes, and many flowers would not be pollinated. The flowering plant population would drop. There would be fewer seeds for many grassland animals. With fewer fewer flowering plants, there would be fewer places for spiders to spin their webs. The spider population would drop. Various types of birds hunt spiders. Without spiders, there would be even less food for birds. Foxes also depend on birds. What might happen to the fox population if there were fewer birds? If there were no hummingbirds, grassland flowers could have trouble growing. Hummingbirds pollinate a variety of flowers. Now, here is an interesting bird found in the grasslands of Africa. It is known for perching on large animals like buffaloes and giraffes. It even perches on zebras to eat organisms found on the zebra's skin. This bird is also known for hissing loudly, alerting the zebra when larger animals are approaching. What do you think would happen if this bird disappeared from its food chain? Each part of a food chain is critical. Even the smallest organism in the food chain affects the whole ecosystem.
Okay, so students would watch that video and then maybe in pairs or small groups, then look at the recurring theme and concept graphic organizer, and together as a class even, we could name the phenomenon, something like changes in the food chain affects the ecosystem. And then students would have an opportunity to write specifically about what changes they noticed, label the change, and then explain how that impacted the stability of the food chain, or specifically how that caused change. When it comes to timing for this kind of thing, I do recognize that the resource is in the Engage blade, and then the support that they would need is in the Explain blade. So I think the best time to offer this lesson about the recurring theme and concept would be in the Explain or Elaborate phase of your lesson. So think about how you could use these resources and intentionally incorporate them into your lessons. And you know where to go if you have questions or need support.